Hey, Ed here. Lessons from my mentor. This one goes back to 2004, University Hospitals, Tom Zenti. I had just become CIO, shared that story previously, and I got called to Tom's office. And he said, Ed, I have two things to share with you. And I remember I pulled my seat really close to his desk because we don't get enough feedback. And the higher we go, then maybe that's a topic for another time. The higher we go in leadership, the less performance feedback we get. There's this assumption that we've arrived and we don't need it, but actually, we probably need it more than ever. So I was eager. And he said, the first thing is you don't have the experience that we would expect in this role, but we knew that when we gave you the chance, right? If you remember that story from one of my previous episodes, I was super young and not qualified in a traditional sense. And he said, but that's all right, because we have a plan. We're going to mentor you and all that kind of stuff. The second thing he said is you don't dress the part. And I was like, what? Because I sort of prided myself on how I dressed. But if you were to hear him tell the story today, it's just funny whenever he does tell it. He talks about me wearing purple jackets and stuff. I'm not sure anything was purple, but maybe it had a little bit of purple in it. But it's kind of funny. But the point was, I wasn't dressing to expectation. And dress is really important. It's just part of your persona, and people will judge you rightly or wrongly about how you dress. So it's something you really need to be cognizant of. So again, I was like eager, like hunched forward, listening intently. And he handed me this business card. I happen to have one here. He says, hey, here's where we all go to, handing me this business card. And so I got the hint. And I said, okay, thank you so much for the feedback. I will take appropriate action. So it made me think about, starting to observe how other people in the C-suite dressed and what the culture was. It was all right in my former position where I wasn't in the C-suite. And at that level, how you dress wasn't as important, although it's still very important, but I got the message. So on that Saturday morning, I'll never forget it. So I used to date my oldest son. I used to date all my kids. And our oldest son, the routine was Saturday morning, we would go out to Panera's and donuts before then, and we would spend some time together. And depending on his age, we would then go do something. We'd go feed ducks around the lake or, do fun things as they got older and older. So in this case, I was like, Brandon, we're going to go to this clothing shop. And we found it was in a certain city that you would expect it to be in the Cleveland area. And it was really small. And I realized as I was walking in, I had already learned this in my life, that the smaller the menu at a restaurant or the smaller the store, the more expensive the prices, right? So this was a boutique men's clothier shop. And it was early in the morning. So as soon as they opened up, I don't know, maybe 10 a.m. And the man looked at me and how I was dressed in there with my son. He goes, oh, we've been expecting you. It was just the creepiest, oddest, but funny thing all at the same time. So I went and said, yeah, indeed, I'm from, XY hospital system, and Tom sent me and, come talk to you. And so we had this conversation, and he asked me, what brands do you normally like to wear? And I was like, man, back then I didn't have this vocabulary of what I might say today. And I was really searching for my words because I didn't want to look, as not naive, but certainly as uneducated as I truly was when it came to clothing. So I gave him some answer. And he said, well, let's take a look at what we had. They just had a single rack of men's suits. And we looked at a few of them, and I was kind of like trying to figure out the pricing here. And I was used to paying, definitely less than $1,000, if not less than $500 for a suit. And these suits were in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then, we looked at some other things too. And, ultimately, I think I walked out of there with some t-shirts and a tie. And that tie was like $150, right? I'd be used to getting 5 ties for $150. But I didn't have the money to buy a $3,000 suit, but I could afford a new tie. But I learned the lesson was that there was this expectation in that culture where if you were an executive, you had to dress a certain way. There was still plenty of opportunity to express yourself individually, but there was a floor in which you needed to dress sharp, because you were representing the organization. So whether or not you agree with that philosophy, the fact is, if your organization is in that philosophy, then you need to, and if you want to stay in that organization and flourish, you need to adopt that practice. And so for me, it was like, oh, I'm all about it. I understand the importance of good clothing and looking good, and being an example, all those sorts of things. So I was bought in. I just couldn't afford that at that point in time, but I was smart enough to know what to do next. And so I grabbed the sharpest dressed individual. His name was Arizona Igwe, sharpest dressed individual in my entire IT team. And I had him come over. I said, Arizona, here's the deal. I need to up my game. He came in, he threw out about 80% of everything was my closet. And then we went shopping. We went to a nice place, but we were able to get some sales, some discounts. He knew the salespeople there. Really nice stuff, but not $3,000 to $5,000, maybe half that. And I just started slowly to build my wardrobe. And then it just depends on the organization. I then served in another organization where they weren't as concerned about, the brand of your clothes and exactly how you look. But I still carry that lesson with me that, hey, I'm going to dress sharp. I'm going to be a sharp dresser, and I'm going to be a modern dresser. And so I kept that with me, the whole time. And in my last organization on the provider side, where I served an executive team, it was really important how you looked and how you dressed. And so, I was able to fit right in because I kind of had that lesson earlier. So that's what I want to talk about, is really dressing. And, you can read a lot of different things about it. Always dress like 2 levels above. So even though everyone else might be dressed as like if you just made up a scale, a traditional grading scale, A, B, C, D, F. And if everyone dressed as a C, but the CEO dressed as an A, you would be dressing as an A. So that's a time-tested truthism, if you will, in terms of how to dress. So you always have to look at the culture. And that's what I mentioned in the story, is think about your culture. And is it important to dress a certain way? And if it is, and you want to stay there and you believe in it, you need to go that route, but still express yourself individually. If you're not in that type of culture, I still think it's important to dress nice and modern. So I think too often, because I see it all the time, where, we buy some clothes and we buy a bunch of ties or a bunch of shirts, some suits, and we never buy another one again. And we might be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I swear I know people, I could see it on their LinkedIn profile even. They're wearing the same suit, the same tie for sure, that they've been wearing since their kids gave that tie to them for Christmas when they were, 5 years old. So the important thing is to keep upping your game, just like you would in anything. In your skill set, you're always upping your game, right? You're not relying on your skill set from 25 years ago. You're always upping your game. So if you're like me, though, and you're not particularly gifted with a sense of fashion, find someone who is. So again, you go to clothier store, finding your own Arizona Igwe to help you. I've always latched on to really sharp dressers, and I just ask them, or I copy them. I look at them, and then I see what trends are out there. I pick, you don't have to do this, but I've picked 1 or 2 particular brands that I really like, and they're always, modernizing. So if you keep up with that particular brand, you'll probably do pretty well. There's also stylists. Some people go out and have stylists. One of our daughters is a stylist, and people pay her lots of money to go out and style people. She styles some very famous people that you would know, but I'm not allowed to tell who they are. But you would know them. You see them on television and things like that. So it's really important to, if you can't, like I couldn't afford a stylist, but, do the next best thing. Follow people. Again, follow a brand, see what's out there, and really sort of adopt the latest. Don't be wearing clothes from 10 years ago. Or shoes. I could tell you look at someone's shoes pretty quick, and that'll tell you the whole story of how modern their clothing wardrobe is. So it is important. I mean, some of you watching this probably like, oh, this is a bunch of BS. No, it's not. And, it depends, again, on your culture. You may have a culture that doesn't care. And then, yeah, something like this would be like a bunch of BS. But most of us are in an organization where there is a culture, and it's important to look good and modern. So that's really the lesson. And it goes back again to 2004, Tom Zenti, how to dress as an executive. It was literally on my mentoring. I've talked about this maybe in the first episode, where for mentoring, we literally had a plan. And the things that we're going to talk about, one of it is executive presence. And one of the sub items on the OKR, objectives and key results, was the executive presence, how to dress like an executive. I mean, we called it right out. So, and again, I'm glad it happened. And you can dress the way you want, when you're outside of the office. And so I express myself very differently than when I'm in the office and out of the office. Although you got to be careful when the two cross paths at time. But anyways, that's it. Hope that helps. And you know what? I really appreciate you watching. I know that you have many, many choices, and I'm glad to put it out there. If you have any particular requests on lessons from my mentor on topics, let me know. Just DM me or put something in the comments and I'll try to address it. All right. Thanks again.